To develop an accurate mental model of the autothrottle, you must know how the autothrottle modes engage and behave. In this video, we'll introduce the autothrottle modes you'll interact with most often, show you how to engage and disengage the autothrottle, and how to determine the current autothrottle mode. To maintain mode awareness, you must know where to look. The autothrottle modes we're going to discuss will be displayed in the Autothrottle Mode Annunciator, located above the ITT gauges in the EIS pane. The status of the autothrottle is shown in the middle of the AFCS status box. The color philosophy for autothrottle modes is the same as the AFCS modes: green for active, white for armed, and yellow for abnormal modes or disconnects. To engage the autothrottle, press the AT key on the mode controller. This will arm the autothrottle on the ground or engage it if airborne. Pressing the AT key in air will engage the autothrottle in a mode that corresponds with the current vertical flight director mode. In addition, the autothrottle is continuously monitoring system status and will automatically engage if it detects a torque or ITT exceedance, an underspeed or overspeed condition, or an activation of emergency descent mode. Disconnecting the autothrottle is similar to disconnecting the autopilot. A single aural
autothrottle
is heard, and AT will flash amber for 5 seconds in the AFCS status box and Autothrottle Mode Annunciator. The primary way to disconnect the autothrottle is by pressing either one of the AT disconnect switches on the power levers. A secondary way is to press the AT key on the mode controller. While not recommended, the autothrottle will disconnect if you overpower the servos. This is treated as an abnormal disconnect, and the autothrottle disconnect aural tone will repeat until acknowledged by pressing the autothrottle disconnect switches. Best practice is to press the autothrottle disconnect switches on the throttles prior to taking control. The autothrottle modes are heavily dependent on two things: the vertical flight director mode and the speed source switch. To help organize the modes, we'll use the table shown here to guide our discussion. We'll begin with AT takeoff. Selecting the AT key on the mode controller prior to takeoff arms AT takeoff. AT takeoff can only be armed on the ground and is the only mode available on the ground. As you roll onto the runway and advance the power levers for takeoff, AT takeoff will transition from armed to active when engine torque on both engines advances beyond 50% torque. The autothrottle will set takeoff torque within torque and ITT limits. AT takeoff will remain active until a new vertical flight director mode is selected. It will automatically transition to AT climb 5 minutes after takeoff if no vertical flight director mode is selected. If the go-around button is pressed in air while the autothrottle is engaged, it will transition to AT takeoff and push the power levers forward to take off torque. Note that for the go-around and missed approach segment of published instrument approach procedures, the speed selector switch must be set to manual. Under normal autothrottle operations, this will have already been done during the approach to landing phase of flight when the pilot wants to slow the aircraft. If the switch is set to FMS, it will follow the speeds on the flight plan FMS en route page, which may be faster than you want to be on downwind or final. FLC is the selected vertical mode the autothrottle will transition to AT climb or AT descent, based on whether the altitude preselector is above or below your current altitude. In either mode, you can use the speed source switch to determine whether to manually control the climb or descent speed, or follow the FMS climb or descent speed schedule. A climb will transition the autothrottle to AT climb. It will command max power based on altitude, temperature, and ITT limits. It can also vary the amount of power used based on the difference between present altitude and target altitude to provide smoother and more comfortable altitude changes. A descent using FLC will transition the autothrottle to AT descent. It will set the power levers for a descent rate of approximately 1,500 to 2,500 feet per minute. The vertical mode for cruise is altitude hold, or ALT. If the speed source switch is in FMS, the autothrottle will transition to AT normal cruise or AT max cruise, depending on what is selected in the flight plan FMS en route page. Torque values will be commanded based on the aircraft flight manual normal and max cruise charts at 1500 RPM
for the given altitude and temperature. If the speed source switch is in manual, the autothrottle will transition to or maintain AT speed. In addition to altitude hold, there are multiple vertical modes that pair with AT speed. AT speed sets the power levers to maintain either the selected manual speed reference or the FMS airspeed, depending on speed source switch position. For example, in vertical path or VNAV, the autothrottle will transition to AT speed and target either the FMS speed schedule or the manually set speed. For glide path and glide slope, the autothrottle mode will be AT speed, and the speed selector will be set to manual to control the speed on final. If the flight director is off or not active, AT speed will be the default mode and set power to target whichever speed source the pilot has selected. In pitch, AT speed will maintain the selected speed, either FMS or manual. Level will only be activated by ESP to return the aircraft to the normal flight envelope. If the autothrottle is active, it will transition to or maintain AT speed. If the autothrottle is not active, it will not automatically engage. The last mode we'll discuss is AT idle, which allows the autothrottle to remain engaged all the way through the landing rollout. When coming in for landing, the autothrottle will transition from AT speed to AT idle and move the power levers to the idle stop. The transition will occur at about 45 feet AGL if the landing gear handle is in the down position, the aircraft is descending, the throttles are below the cruise torque limit, the radio altimeter is valid, and AT takeoff is not the active mode. About 2 to 5 seconds after touchdown, the autothrottle will disconnect with no alerting indications. If the system does not detect the airplane is on the ground within 20 seconds, the autothrottle will disconnect and alert the pilot. This concludes video 4 of the King Air B300 Autothrottle series.
You should now be able to state how to engage and disengage the autothrottle and name the autothrottle modes that pair with each vertical flight director mode. Anticipating the correct autothrottle mode during transitions between vertical flight director modes is a sure sign of your accurate mental model.